Back to our top story, the escalating situation in Ukraine. Diplomatic efforts continue right now with fears that an invasion by Russia could be imminent.
Tia is back with a closer look at this threat and what it might mean for people in the U.S. Tia?
Well, Anthony and Sally, the U.S. announcing they are closing the embassy in Kyiv and moving remaining diplomats to western Ukraine amid fears of Russian invasion. And I'm joined now by William Muck, professor of political science at North Central College. Thank you so much for being with us.
Always good to chat with you.
Let's talk about this. You know, there's speculation that Russia will actually make this move and invade Ukraine come Wednesday. Do you believe that is actually going to happen sometime this week?
It's really anybody's guess, and I think the only person who really knows this is Vladimir Putin, and he may not even have made a decision yet. If we look at the evidence and we look what Russia's been doing, the acceleration of their military activity along the border in Belarus, it's sending all sorts of signals that they intend to move. But at the same time, as you noted, diplomacy is continuing. Putin is talking to Germany. Biden had a conversation with Putin the other day. So there's all sorts of mixed signals. And I think a lot of this is about framing the conflict. Russia doesn't want to be portrayed as the aggressor, and they're trying to do everything they can to avoid that with not a whole lot of success.
You know, we talked a little bit about this in the break of why this would not be a good idea for the U.S., but I know you want to talk about why this wouldn't be a good idea for Russia as well.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think for the United States, it's really about leadership. And the United States wants to be the leader here in terms of diplomacy and setting an agenda that it's not appropriate to be invading countries in the 21st century. But I think a bigger picture here is also thinking about how much of a terrible idea this would be for Russia. Russia's economic interest, its political interest, its diplomatic interest. So there really is not a lot of reason for Russia to do this, other than I think Putin has backed himself into a corner. And that's really, really important because the United States needs to find a way to allow Putin to save face, to get out of this without looking weak, because he's also thinking about his domestic dynamics. So there's just so many variables at play here that makes it such a complicated situation.
You know, one of the variables that I keep hearing from people over and over again is that this war would trigger one of the worst and most dangerous national security crises. Can you break down how that would be and how that would play out?
Yeah, so if you think about it, if fighting breaks out in Ukraine, Russia is a major military power. NATO will likely try to stay out as much as possible, but you're going to have fighting in Europe. And there's always the potential that this spreads. So, I mean, you can think back to Yugoslavia in the 90s when violence played out there. And I think there's some people seeing that type of dynamic. And so it's a test of U.S. leadership. It's a test of the ability to push back against Russia, which is really trying to violate long-standing international norms. So anytime fighting like this breaks out, it's really, really difficult to stop that. And I think that's why diplomacy is so important here.
Professor Muck, what would you say to everyday Americans about why Russia and Ukraine should matter to them?
Well, I think a lot of it is the normative principles, right? So we live in an international system of non-intervention. It's the 21st century, and you don't see tanks rolling across borders anymore. That was something for the 20th century. And so Russia is trying to play throwback and go back to a different era when you can intimidate countries. And I think that's really important because Ukraine is a U.S. ally. They're a country that's trying to connect more with Europe economically, politically, and all of those things are in the U.S. interest. And it's not in U.S. interest to see a resurgent Russia pushing back against those norms. So this really does matter for U.S. leadership and for international norms in the 21st century.
Professor Muck, it is always a pleasure to have you here on the show. You join us with North Central College. You always make it so simple, so plain for all of us to understand. We appreciate you.
Good to be here.
All right, I'm sure we'll be talking to you again. Sally and Anthony, I'll send it back to you.